We all know well, or almost all, the popular hotels, the key battlefield fort game, which has been broadcast on the NTV channel since 1994 by the Central. The object of this television show was a stone fort located on its Atlantic coast of France between the islands Aix and Aileron, and the history of this unique building today we will tell you. The first proposal for the construction of the fort appeared in 1666 after the construction of the shipyard for the construction of warships near the town of Rochefort located at the mouth of the Charente River, but the shipyard was vulnerable to attacks by enemy ships to penetrate the mouth of the Charente. Bypassing the cannon of the coastal fortress of the nearby islands was not labor before the King Louis XIV. Shipyard safety problem. Fort built in the middle of the strait together with coastal batteries could block the passage, creating a fire barrier in front of the enemy ships. However, the legendary engineer, whether the falsifier Sebastian Beaufort for the sake of the Vauban whom the Ludwig XIV proposed to head the construction, refused to participate, referring to the fact that it is impossible to build a fortress in such a place, and the project was frozen. The idea of building a fort returned at the beginning of the 19th century. At that time, construction technologies already allowed the construction of such fortress, and the need for it remained very urgent. The foreign policy of Napoleon I greatly complicated relations between France and Great Britain. The construction was started in 1801, but already existed in a strait of sandbank, from the name of which the name of the fort itself took place, since the sandy base of the spit. The boyars were not suitable for such construction. It was decided to make a mound of stones extracted from local quarries. Stone blocks were taken to the open sea and dumped on fragile. The sandy bed of the spit could be done only at low tide, and only in those seasons when the capricious nature of the coastal area allowed it to be done on the third the year of construction. It became clear that the stone blocks under their own weight are more and more deepening in the sand. As a result, in 1809 the construction of the fortress was suspended, and resumed only in 1837, during the reign of Louis Philippe I, when relations with Great Britain again became very tense. By that time they had once strengthened me on sandbanks. It was greatly facilitated by work and technological progress. At the disposal of builders appeared concrete and cement, but the construction of the fort still turned out to be a protracted fortress. Was completed only by 1857. Ready Fort was 68 meters long and 31 meters wide at a height of 20 meters. 66 fort casemates could accommodate 74 artillery guns. Fort garrison held 260 people. In case of siege, the garrison could hold out for 2 months using water and food supplies. It would seem what more to wish after. Fort's enormous efforts are finally built and ready to fully justify the funds invested in its construction, but now it's an irony of fate, by the time the construction was completed, that fort is no longer needed. For more than 50 years since the fort was laid, the range of artillery guns increased dramatically, and now coastal batteries easily block the strait, so the need for it disappeared. However, Fort remained the introduction military department of France, and subsequently used as a prison without participating in hostilities. However, the fort was destined to spend a short time in prison in 1872. Relocated to a special colony on the island of New Caledonia, and the fortress was occupied by the Navy, so Fort Boyar nevertheless received the status of a military facility, and was, until 1913, when the military finally left the fortress, an empty fort became an excellent prey for thieves. All that was at least some value was deduced during the Second World War. Fort Boyar, as the whole of France was occupied by German troops, the invaders used the fortress as a target for training firing, as a result of which marinas and breakwaters were almost completely destroyed, and the fort's courtyard was literally buried. Over the next 20 years, Fort remained completely desolate under stone debris, and gradually collapsed from the effects of the sea of wind and seabirds. 28. On May 1962, the Boyars were put up for auction at an initial price of 70,500 francs and were purchased by the dentist Eric R. there for 28,000 francs. However, he did not have the means to restore the fortress, which more and more fell into decay not only from natural influences, but also from numerous tourists literally versed on a souvenir. However, soon the whole world first learned about this fort in 1966. Robert Enrico put the final scene of his films Fort Boyard, Adventurers with 2 stars of French cinema along Delon or Screw Urai. After a rather long break already in 1980, the fort reappears on the screens, this time in a game show hunting for treasures, the author of which was a famous figure in French television, Jacques Antoine. It was he who discovered Fort Bayard while watching Adventurers and suggested using fortresses for filming a new television game, but it before Fort appeared on the screens sporadically. Then in the new game he was assigned the main role. At that time the fortress was a private property. Belgian dentist and record agreed to sell Fort and for 1.5 million francs, and the General Council of the Department Seaside Charente risked a deal, and then Jacques Antoine, having paid a symbolic sum of 1 franc, became the owner of the fort and took up the implementation of his project. In 1989, reconstruction begins. 25 meters from the fort a platform is being built for the berth of ships. The old fort pier was destroyed long ago. The inner courtyard was cleaned of 5-10 centimeter layer of bird droppings accumulated here for many decades, and from almost 700 cubic meters of stone debris were equipped with 2 halls for the television game of the same name. A few months later, in 1990, the first issue of the television game was removed. The keys to the Fort of Boyars and a new fort story era. That's all friends. Support us, like and repost if you were interested in the preparation of the video. Used materials from the site fortboyard.ru.